Hi, I'm Poire. Today we're going to be talking about Elden Ring PVP and why there are some issues with it currently as of the network tests that the community has made apparent. This video is not about taking a maidenless dump on Elden Ring PVP, however, I've actually enjoyed some of the new aspects personally, and I've seen people even enjoy the new gank invasions. But there are some things that absolutely need to be changed, and some other things that could be adjusted to make the multiplayer experience better. The situation is a bit deja vu, however. When the network test released, a similar problem happened with the initial gameplay preview. When the preview dropped, people were criticizing Elden Ring's graphics, and more specifically, its abundance of reused Dark Souls 3 animations. While I personally didn't mind it, as it makes sense to reuse some animations as it allows them to focus on other things, the problem is that it may not just be a case of reused animations now, but an entire reuse of code and assets. Enter nearly all of Dark Souls 3 weapon and item bugs and glitches returning. If you don't know what these bugs and glitches are, go check out G9. He's made some YouTube videos covering the bugs from the network test in great detail that I'll link in the comments. Now, Elden Ring is a new game, a new IP even. So why are all these bugs in a previous game returning all at once? The only conclusion that I can think of is that they simply ported over the multiplayer framework along with a handful or even most animations with little rework done outside of a few controversial changes. We were all wanting Elden Ring because we wanted a different game, so it is a bit of a letdown that even this negative aspect has carried over. Now, most of these glitches are on the higher end of sweatiness when it comes to PvP. At launch, or even just in general, majority of the player base will hardly encounter someone abusing these things. But that does not take away that they are still a problem, as they progressively became worse and more commonplace the older the meta got and the less player base there was, and should have been addressed long ago. Now is From's chance to make up for their neglect to ensure these glitches stay far away from their newest shining star. And that's my point in bringing them up. As yes, the Elden Ring closed network test has tons of positive stuff to comment about. I had a blast. Collector's Edition was pre-ordered day one. But we should not neglect some of these negatives, and rather than sprinkle negative opinions in an overall positive video like most have done, I rather round them up all here so it's easier for From to see what exactly are the problems. So glitches, bugs, fixed them. Pretty obvious. Now we'll move on to the general components of the PvP and potential issues or improvements to make before release. Personally, for the same exact reasons I stated earlier, I do not want Elden Ring to just be Dark Souls 3 PvP. I've seen people on Reddit, YouTube, and Discord effectively say they just want Dark Souls 3 imported, backstabs and all. I disagree. Dark Souls 3 was From's best PvP yet, but it was still far from ideal in my opinion. Now I'll preface that by saying I played PvP since the OG Demon Souls. Dark Souls 1, where I did gank invasions most. I skipped Dark Souls 2, but got back into PvP in Dark Souls 3. Hundreds of hours, but this time mostly the dueling aspect over the gank spanks. Was I the best person with perfect parries, pivot backstab punishing with weapon and ring swaps 24/7? No. But I wasn't an R1 spammer either. Regardless, I am aware of the super techie stuff despite not playing in years, because I watch people who do such things regularly, and still generally have experience with all forms of the series PvP in some average sense. And I think the hope of Elden Ring PvP for many was not just DS3 copy pasta. No, but an improved game with better netcode, better hitboxes, more weapon variety, and making ganks less busted as they were in 3, the supposed best PvP in the Souls series. Has Elden Ring done a good job at tackling those issues? Well, let's find out. We'll get the elephant out of the way first. Backstabs. In the network tests, backstabs were near impossible to do. The only time you would reliably pull it off is if the player stopped moving completely in order for your animation to initiate the suck. If people spam parry, you couldn't backstab them, even if you were behind them. If someone spammed spells, you couldn't backstab them, even if you were behind them. And if someone simply pivoted during the startup of you doing a backstab, you couldn't backstab them. So some of these may be bugged out it seems, but the essential removal of backstab more or less in Elden Ring's PvP is the biggest difference between ER and DS3. Gabri on Reddit made a great post with tons of upvotes and comments. Although I don't agree with everything they said, it was still a great write-up showcasing the issues people had that I'll link in the comments too. However, he did say this.
Dark Souls 1 backstabs were rightfully nerfed in Dark Souls 2 and then refined to perfection in Dark Souls 3. The best solution is to bring the Dark Souls 3 version as it worked just fine and has been tried and tested for 5 years straight with overwhelmingly positive reception.
I somewhat disagree. I do not think Dark Souls 3 backstabs were refined to perfection. In fact, the lack of backstabs in the test made things more interesting. People couldn't simply rotate around you constantly to fish for a backstab, hoping you'd whiff the R1 on a slightly long animation, especially with how strong shields are in this game, where they could have simply turtled, rotate, backstab over and over. Backstabs in DS3 also made ultra weapons vastly inferior to faster ones because you could easily dodge, roll behind a UGS R1, and land a backstab. Bringing backstabs as is from DS3 would also kill off jump attacks entirely. You know, the new feature for Elden Ring, as the player can simply roll through the jump attack, be behind their player's back after a pivot, and backstab for 600 damage. No, I agree, backstab should be there to punish exposing your back, but the punishes should be much less than they were in DS3. My guess is Elden Ring startup frames are way less than DS3, so the proc is harder, and even if you do proc, 99% of the time you'll do a whiff animation as they would move by then. So the fix really is a timing thing. I do not think it should be as fast as Dark Souls 3, which was plagued with teleport backstabs. But you should also definitely be able to backstab someone who was in a stationary position casting a big ass spell or literally spamming parry for more than a second. If someone does an R1 with an ultra, however, you shouldn't be able to punish them with a backstab. However, an R2, for example, should be punishable. If someone pivots or rolls, I do not think the backstab should land. If they have enough time to do those actions, then they have escaped your backstab successfully, as they are not in a stationary position where their back turned to you. In other words, the backstab window should only appear if the person is stationary. If someone is running or rolling away, your punishes should be running R1s, not backstabs. Regarding the whiff animation, they simply need to tighten it up to where the animation only appears if you successfully trigger the backstab. Or how about this, in the case of ultras again, if you roll behind their R1, the backstab animation shouldn't exist, because there's no point during the R1 animation where backstab will be allowed, letting you instead use your normal R1, so no whiff animation. Perhaps I could phrase it like this. During standard R1s, backstabs should be disabled. The player has to recover to the default standing animation in order for the backstab window to appear. This removes whiffs completely and can safeguard jump attacks too. I think that makes sense in the R1's case for balance. But let me know your thoughts on backstabs below. Do you want Dark Souls 3 backstabs to return? Would you like Elden Ring to just remove them? Or do you want a happy in between? Moving on to Hyper Armor and Poise. This was another talking point by the community. However, from the gameplay preview, we know Poise is returning. But in the network test itself, it seems the stat was completely removed from the stat screen, which is odd, given that you could still wear the full Ordovis armor, the heaviest set in the test, to Poise. But it would only work against like straight swords, curved swords, or a dagger, and not something like another greatsword. But contrary to what early access guys believed, we now know Elden Ring backstabs are not like DS3 at all, hence the complaints. But if Dark Souls 3 backstabs were brought back, then we will likely have a Dark Souls 1 situation where you simply poise the hit, rotate around someone, then pivot and backstab. You could even do it in DS3 even without the poise. So with passive poise, it'd be even worse. So again, the points I mentioned earlier where R1's disabled backstabs and moving also prevented backstabs would also negate this poise backstab fishing problem as well. As far as hyper armor, while I like DS3 hyper armor attacks on greatswords and heavier weapons, or weapon skills, it was neat, but at the same time, it was kinda stupid. You could be naked and use Smaug's hammer R1 and not flinch to anything. Poise ensures that if you want to go Oonga Boonga, you gotta wear heavy armor, and not be a light armor power stance UGS user who could hyper armor everything. If there is one thing to give hyper armor to, regardless of poise, Perhaps it is Ash of War skills and certain counterattacks, aka not shielded counters, but greatsword two-hand block counters. They should have hyper armor. But I'd like to see how Poise affects things first on release before making that move. Do note, however, that the Rolling Great Lance R1 in the test had hyper armor, so I'm not sure if that was bugged, but yeah, it was amongst the only weapons to do so. Also, some AOWs did have hyper armor, like the step-in skill, which also reduced damage as well. Next, blocking and shields. The Barricade Ash of War on the shield can literally block tons of your attacks before you even being able to break the guard. I've seen a clip of 2 people counter-guarding each other with the lances, and neither broke guard in over like 6 hits or so. The straight sword guard break Ash of War also couldn't even break the guard of a shield with the Barricade skill, so shield mitigation might need to be looked into. The kick from Dark Souls 3 was removed, so the only true way to punish turtles is either the barehanded Ash of War kick, which to be fair does do a good job at breaking shields, or jump attack spamming, or as Boomstick Gaming discovered, shield jump attacks and counters in the right hand could deal insane amounts of stagger damage. So someone who's turtling has a bit too much power, and that needs to be addressed. Sure, backstabs were a punish to it, but I think just adjusting the shield threshold would be easier. They could make the barehanded kick have a wider hitbox to compensate from a turtle rotating them. They could even make jump attack R2s have a 360-degree turn to prevent a turtle from circling them. We also don't know what other tools are going to be available in the game to counter shields. So again, I don't want to jump the shark on asking for nerfs and such, but it is something worth looking into from. Also, because of the backstab situation mentioned earlier, I think parries should disallow you from moving or rotating. Currently, in the test, if you're locked onto a target, if you simply stand in place and spam parry, you will automatically rotate. This is likely the cause of not being able to land a backstab. So if you parry consecutively, you should remain stationary facing the same direction you used the first in. Thus, get punished if you spam parry more than once. If you want to rotate, you will have to stop parrying and then turn the direction you want and then start to parry again. And this should solve the backstab issue while having little impact on actual game mechanics, because you shouldn't ever need to use it twice in a row that often. As for punishes to parry spammers, that is what the jump attacks are for, and you need to adapt to that instead of circling for backstabs constantly, which a jump attack is fast enough to punish someone parrying as seen by Peeve here. You don't have enough time to parry during a jump animation and land an R1 before the opponent's jump attack lands. This is the new way to punish parries. Next, rolling. I don't know if rolling has the same iframes as Dark Souls 3, but it seems about the same, for better or worse. This is where backstabs may have some relevancy if brought back to Dark Souls 3 levels, cause without it, rolling is pretty cheap in Elden Ring. It's spammable, doesn't cost much stamina, you iframe most attacks, and yeah, rolling was a bit out of control in the test. Let me know your thoughts in the comments. Next, guaranteed combos. In Elden Ring, you're no longer guaranteed a R1 into R1 combo, and potentially more things are not guaranteed as well, like weapon arts. This is a change I actually do really like, as it gives slower weapons a better chance against faster weapons, and it means if you're caught by a slower weapon, you don't lose 90% of your HP. There also still exist certain Ashes of War combos. Peeve used the Stomp Ash of War into Twin Blade attack consecutively, so there are some skills that lead into true combos where even if the opponent is spamming roll after the first hit, they'll still get hit by the follow-up attack. In my opinion, true combos should only exist for certain attacks. Getting one shot by a weapon in Dark Souls 3, like let's say Gundir's Glaive weapon art, was a bit lame. It did help a lot in ganks, but also made 1v1 scenarios a bit too one-trick pony, where it became a game of who lands their weapon art first. So I hope the guarantees are kept to a minimum. And without the guaranteed R1, roll catching was more rewarding, so I think the skill level mind games are going to be more interesting there. However, pause everything, there is one major problem that must be addressed, as otherwise ganks will be an absolute nightmare. Despite not having that second guaranteed R1 in 1v1s, in multiplayer, if you are hit by alternating R1s by different people, you will be infinitely stun locked. Example, in a 3v1 scenario, person on the left hits you, stun lock, person in the middle hits you, stun lock, Person on the right hits you right after. Stun lock, and you repeat back to the left until death. It seems the system only checks the stun lock threshold against one attacker, but not multiple attackers. This has got to change. Dark Souls 3 fixed this after its closed network test, so there is hope here, but yes, this is one thing you all must bring to From's attention when reporting feedback. Next, guard counterattacks are a new thing in Elden Ring, and I personally really like them. They seem strong in PvE, and in PvP, they have their moments. However, if you hit someone with an R1, they block and counter, you can still easily just roll their counterattack or even interrupt them. Again, with Poise, that should solve the latter, but just being able to roll through it is a bit lame. But counter argument is if the counter was always a guaranteed hit, then everyone would just turtle. So the counterattacks, in my opinion, are fine as is. The only thing that should be adjusted is two-handed guard attack counters. They should have hyper armor to compensate for the fact that you take more damage from the initial block. I think that's fair to ask. Last topic is multiplayer and invasions. They changed the system to where the host has to use an item to see summons, and even after doing so, they cannot be invaded till they have at least one co-op partner summoned. And to that, I agree with this change. I don't think 1v1 invasions were fair to the host. If you wanted 1v1s, that's the reason red summon signs exist. At least now, with the open world, the host can choose a spot closer to where their destination is before summoning help and dealing with invaders. However, I think this item itself, for calling Finger Remedy, is not needed. Offline will still exist, so why should someone online go out of the way to use and farm this item when they can't be invaded anyways? They should just remove this item and you just auto see signs by default when online, and multiplayer only activates if you summon someone. I think that makes more logical sense. The item is just kind of an unnecessary step. Of course, with this item, invaders are limited to just one, so you're looking at a 3v1 scenario in an open world where killing certain enemies will gain the host and likely summons Estus back. Also, world bosses like the Tree Sentinel or Dragon can also hit the invader. This seems atrocious, however, it's not that bad. I've seen many people succeed in gank spanks. I heavily watched Peeves' VODs in between sessions, and he succeeded in most of his gank invasions thanks to a new dried finger item that was a get out of jail free card. And we don't even have the power advantage that most invaders do. We were all stuck to +3 weapons with arguably no broken weapons and pretty much no poise even. Elden Ring PVP was a war of attrition and the impatient got clapped. So I heard a lot of crying on Reddit, and at least from the higher skill players, it seems like a fun time, if not the best invasions have ever been, despite their big disadvantage. However, counterpoint is that majority of these people did use Beast Claw, which you could argue was OP in the test. If you invaded with just say a normal greatsword or straight sword or even the lightning katana with minimal spell reliability, you probably sang a different tune. But counterpoint to that is that if you want success, you use the tools that best give you the upper hand. The next item, however, Taunter's Tongue, makes no logical sense. This item allows you to be solo invaded, and you could be invaded by 2 people with up to 1 summon. So total max player count is always at 4 in any of these combinations. But no one will use this item that much unless they want fight clubs. In my opinion, this should have been swapped with the Finger Remedy. So the furled Finger Remedy should have allowed up to only 1 summon with the host and 1 invader, 2v1, while Taunters should have allowed up to 2 summons with 2 invaders. So Remedy 2v1, Taunters 3v2. I think that makes more logical sense. If the host really wanted a lot of summons to beat content with, then the risk was an additional invader. If they want to just play with a friend, then they only had to deal with 1 invader. This seems more like the logical balance choice. Invaders are still always outnumbered, especially with the open field where I saw a lot of the fights at. They weren't really fighting in the tight dungeons with enemies galore. No, the enemies were spread out quite a bit and they usually were on the easier side of things. And the tougher things like crabs or giants can still hit the invader. So in this scenario, if they changed it to what I just said, the balance could be that they give invaders back the health penalty. So 2v1, the invader has 30% less HP, 3v2, both invaders have 30% less HP as compensation. Because when you think about it logically, we already have the 2v2 Taunter's Tongue thing. If that stays as is, you could argue, how is that balanced at all? Which is why I said, who's even going to use this thing, whereas the change I mentioned would be balanced in host's favor in both scenarios. So, I don't know. Are you guys happy with the summoning ratio? 3v1, 2v2, or do you think that should be changed to what I mentioned or something similar? Let me know in the comments. And in the case of the 3v1, host could also use the Dark Moonlight Police 911 service, White Cipher Ring, which calls for blues to enter their game if under attack. Now, while I did say some invaders had fun with the 3v1 scenario, I don't actually think most hosts even knew this item existed. Had more people use this item, I think invaders might be singing different tunes, as it'll allow a blue to auto get summoned to the host if one of their normal gold guys die, regardless of where they're at. So in the full game, once more people are aware of this item, I think invaders will have an even tougher time, which goes back to what I mentioned earlier. Should the 3v2 be allowed in this case? Because guaranteed most people did not use this item after summoning 2 helpers, as when I used the blue cipher ring to be called in, it took a very long time to be summoned, like 10 to 20 minutes in the second to last session. As for the controversial Phantom Bloody Finger item, invaders get 10 of these, and it has some hyper armor and even invulnerability frames on the last few frames, until it respawns the invader out of combat to somewhere else near the host. To top it off, to get to these frames, its animation activation is super quick. And again, you get 10 of them, on top of invaders knowing where the hosts are via the compass. Should this item get removed? No. Hell no. It's for sure needed to keep things even a smidge on a level playing field. But I do think it's a bit too powerful, or at the very least, a bit too plentiful. So my suggestions are these 3. Reduce the startup animation slightly, reduce the quantity to like 3, which from what I've seen most people never went over 5 uses, or 3, get rid of the count and just make it a cooldown item that you can only use once every 1 to 3 minutes. This would keep an invader from spamming it too much and using it to be annoying rather than a tactical retreat. I'm not asking for all of these at once, just pick one from software and see how things turn out. And the last multiplayer item allows you to send signs to specific pools in the world. This overall was a great addition, although I would like 2 separate pools of gold signs and red signs, as it mixes them all up in one spot, making it annoying to select a certain sign. And last little thing regarding multiplayer is that you can create passwords for multiplayer to make it easier to summon specific people, or even groups of people if you wanted to host a fight club. Like with the password PAR, we can have fight clubs on stream for example, and if you leave the password on, you'll always be able to fight people within your community. And by leaving the normal multiplayer password blank, you can still see random normal signs and such outside of your group which have different symbols compared to the normal signs. So this is a very cool feature and shows that From does sometimes pay attention to the PvP community. Also real quick, for people wondering, the game is cross-gen on same ecosystems. So PS4 players can play with PS5, Xbones with the Series X chads, PC 3090 can play with 1060 bros. But yeah, I think that should cover just about everything regarding multiplayer and PvP. Right now the big complaints seem to be invasions are too hard, backstabs too useless, the R1 stun lock in multiplayer has to be fixed, and the rest I think is just not really too much to take seriously until the game releases, aside the bugs and glitches that should be fixed prior to release. But yeah, what do you guys think of the quote-unquote problems or Elden Ring's multiplayer in general? Do you agree with the people's complaints? Do you disagree? And what solutions do you think may solve the problem? From Software had a survey they sent out, which I'll link in the comments. Make sure to put your thoughts there. And lastly, this video discussion was all in good faith of wanting to make the game better. As I said, I had a ton of fun in the test, so if this is just the tip of the iceberg, February can't come soon enough, baby. Unless they delay the game because of bugs and feedback, but yeah. Make sure to give the video a like so it's seen more often. I have a spoiler-free info video if you don't want to see boss footage and stuff, but still want to know more general stuff about the game. I have some PvP duels using the trash Hordova's Greatsword if you want to watch that. And yeah, subscribe and hit the noti for more Elden Ring content in the future.
Holy shit!